Trained at the Hazelton Foundation, she was one of the first student assistant program trainers in the state of Illinois. These are programs that provide early identification and prevention of substance abuse and mental illness. In addition to being a mom of 3, Peggy also maintains a private clinical practice in Winnetka and facilitates a parent education program called Roots and Wings, raising resilient children in schools on the North Shore of Chicago. Thank you so much for joining us today, Peggy.
Thank you, Jessica, for the introduction. I'm happy to be back with you today. Some of you may have heard my last webinar in January on the Erika's Lighthouse Parent Handbook on childhood and adolescent depression. If you did not, you might want to return sometime to the Balanced Mind Foundation's website and listen to it. You might want to download a free copy of the handbook on their web or on our web, and you can also order a bound copy from Amazon.com. A brief introduction about Erika's Lighthouse. Erika's Lighthouse was started 8 years ago when Erika Newkrantz lost her life to depression at age 14. We dedicated to educating our community, our children, our parents, teachers, health professionals, about childhood and adolescent depression. Our hope is to break the stigma surrounding this illness so that the children who need help can get the help that they deserve. So we have a few messages in our organization that we often think about when we talk to communities about adolescent depression. We encourage you to embrace these messages. Depression is a common illness. It's very treatable. There's lots of help available, and you deserve to feel better. We think that these messages are really important to hold close to you because as a parent, it's going to guide your thoughts and it's going to guide your actions. For example, if you believe that this is an illness, then there's no blame and there's no shame. And because this is so treatable, your job as a parent is to manage the treatment plan, making sure your child gets the help that they deserve to feel better. Today, schools are teaching students about depression and good mental health, but reaching parents with this information can be really hard. That's why we wrote the Parent Handbook, and that's why we're introducing you to our study guide today. Now, before we get to the study guide itself, I want to review the definition of clinical depression because it's very specific. You must have at least 5 symptoms most every day for 2 weeks or more. And one of those 5 symptoms has to be the first 2, which are bolded on your screen. So sad, depressed, or irritable mood. In teenagers, you are primarily going to see that irritable mood. They're cranky, they're sensitive, they just don't feel right. Loss of interest in pleasure or favorable activities. This would be loss of interest in things that are really important to your children. Their friends, their sports, their schools. It's not just giving up an activity that they really didn't care a whole lot about. Like, let's say they never really liked piano and now they don't want to play anymore. Not the same thing. The rest of the symptoms, you can have a combination of these other symptoms that are listed here. Perhaps sleep will be affected. Maybe they're sleeping too much or too little. Maybe their appetite will be affected. Eating too much, eating too little. Feelings of worthlessness, difficulty concentrating, or perhaps reoccurring thoughts of death or suicide. So you're looking for a combination of these factors and including one of the first 2 symptoms. Now, our study guide. The Balanced Mind Foundation, as you heard, has made a limited number of copies of the study guide available to you through Erika's Lighthouse. You can order a copy at our website or the Balanced Mind website, and we're ericaslighthouse.org, as it says. I hope you've had a chance to look at the short video called Real Teenagers Talking About Adolescent Depression. This video features students from our high school speaking off the cuff about depression. They're talking about stigma, helping a friend, how to help a friend who's considering suicide. The beauty of this video is that it's real teenagers speaking, and they offer concrete information from a teen's perspective, and they model the matter-of-fact tone that we suggest everyone can use when discussing the topic of depression. If you've not seen the video, it is on the Balanced Mind website as well as the Erika's Lighthouse website, and it's only 9 minutes long, so take a few minutes and take a look at it. The study guide is based on this video. Our study guide includes exercises to explore a deeper understanding of depression, exercises on the science of the brain and depression, the stigma surrounding depression, bullying and depression. There's exercises on coping with stress, on building resiliency, and how to help a friend who's suffering from depression. We wrote this study guide to be used by teachers in a classroom or in a youth group. However, we realize that it has application for parents as well. And this is not just for parents who have a child who is struggling with depression. This guide will help us as parents open up conversations with our children about what makes up good mental health. So now I'm going to highlight a few exercises from the study guide that you can do at home with your children. The first is a discussion-based exercise which will be very helpful if your child is struggling with depression. We suggest you begin by reading the introductory primer about depression, which can be found on page 5 and 6 in the study guide. If you do have a child going through a clinical depression, we hope that you've taken the steps to get them into treatment with a professional, that they're receiving therapy, perhaps medication, and you are helping them practice ways to support a healthy lifestyle. These exercises offer coping skills, coping strategies, everyday things that you can do to deal with depression. So you begin by watching the video with your child, and then you can use each discussion point to create a personal plan with your child. So the first point, sit in front of the classroom at school. We know that children with depression often have issues with attention. This illness affects cognitions, and you may have difficulty tracking or difficulty staying connected to what the teacher is saying. So if you sit in the front of the classroom, it's going to be easier to stay focused. One of the symptoms of depression is that it can affect sleep patterns. So another suggestion would be for children to set good sleep hygienes. We know that kids can be very tired because they're not getting enough sleep. Maybe they're having trouble sleeping at all. So by setting this good sleep hygiene, getting into bed the same time every night, setting an alarm to get up the same time every morning, you're striving for 8 hours of sleep. Now, we know that with high school students, this can be hard to do, but it really is worth the effort to try to get into a regular pattern, more nights than not, of going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. When struggling with depression, it can feel as if you never accomplish anything. So we do suggest that your child keeps a chart of daily progress at home and at school. It can be little things, little steps like getting up and getting to school. That could be a big accomplishment. We also know that negative self-talk that comes with depression, things like when your child will say, I can't do anything right, or I'm so stupid. This chart can also serve as a counterbalance for negative self-talk, because now there it is in black and white that hopefully you are making progress and you are accomplishing things. Eating healthy, getting vigorous exercises, this stuff can make a huge difference in how well someone feels physically. In fact, there are many studies coming out now which shows that exercise, practicing yoga and meditation, all of these factors can, all of these activities can reduce the symptoms of depression. If you're eating, if you're exercising healthily, yoga, meditation, this is something the whole family can practice together. It's good for the health of the whole family. Talking to a trusted adult, starting a journal, these are great tips to encourage your child so that they have an outlet to begin to process and understand their emotions. This journal can be something that they could take to a therapist as well. The last 3 points: do something fun, learn a new hobby, listen to music, dance, relax. These are all great tips to encourage your children to do when they're feeling up to it. Remember that this is an illness, and this illness can ebb and flow. There will be days when just getting out of bed is a big enough accomplishment. There's going to be plenty of time to remember to do fun things, but hold to your heart, parents. Strive not to let your children give up on their dreams. Now, our video talks a lot about overcoming stigma. The actual definition of stigma is a mark of shame. The stigma surrounding mental illness, this is what can keep young people and families from seeking the help that they deserve. This is an exercise that compares mental illness to the physical illness of breast cancer. You could begin by reading the introduction on page 45. Ask your child to think about the words that come to mind when you think about someone with a mental illness like depression. Now, even the word mental illness, this can conjure up images of people who are weak or crazy or someone who's out of control. But these are stereotypes. But it's this image and these attitudes that keep us from wanting to talk openly about depression. We don't want to be judged. A teenager doesn't want to feel like they're any different than any other teenager. The next thing you want to do is ask your child to describe the words that come to mind when they think about breast cancer. Typically, you will elicit words like sad or maybe even hopeful or strong or pink or walks. You know, what many people don't realize is that not so long ago, no one talked about cancer. It was taboo. And now there's walks and commercials, and everyone knows about breast cancer. Everybody talks about it. So it's our hope that with education and understanding, these are the factors that will help us combat the stigma around mental illness and make it as easy to talk about as breast cancer is. The discussion will continue by asking your child why they think someone would view a physical illness and a mental illness differently. You can point out that there's actually more similarities with a physical and a mental illness than there are differences. Typically, both illnesses have a biological base, a biological aspect to them. Both illnesses have a genetic predisposition, might possibly be passed in families. Treatment for cancer often involves lifestyle changes like exercise and changing your diet and medication. Same is true with depression. You might change your lifestyle. You may learn how to cope with stress and anxiety differently. And there are many, many treatments for both of these illnesses. Someone who tried this exercise pointed out to me that they really liked comparing mental illness to breast cancer because with breast cancer, early identification and early intervention can make the prognosis so much better. The same is true with childhood and adolescent depression. Early identification and early intervention is what we hope for. Education and awareness is going to be the best way to combat stigma. Don't let ignorance keep you from finding the help that you and your family deserve. We have another exercise on breaking stigma that we thought we would introduce to you. It involves educating family members of an older generation, grandparents, maybe even an aunt or an uncle. Remember that our children are the first generation of young people who are learning about teen depression. I mean, up until recently, people didn't even think teens could get depression. Grandparents may not understand what depression is. Maybe they called it something else, but most likely they didn't really even talk about it. So you can begin again by reading the introduction on page 45 of the study guide. This exercise asks you to introduce the video to family members and then follow it up with an interview about stigma that we do provide in the guide. The interview asks family members, what they learned from the video, what they learned about depression that they didn't know before, what they thought depression was prior to this education. This is a great tool to introduce your extended family to depression. But remember, you have to respect your child's privacy. Do not open up a discussion about your child's depression with extended family members without first discussing this with your child. They might not be comfortable yet sharing this information with grandma, grandpa, or the extended family. We also recommend this exercise to young people who are concerned about a parent's depression or another adult's depression. By showing a parent our video and using this discussion guide, it's a way for a young person to bring up the topic of adult depression when they're concerned about someone they love. Bottom line is, the more people in your world who understand what you and your family are going through, the wider your safety net around your child will be. So the next exercise that we've included for you is how to help a friend. When we go into schools and talk to teens, we hear this question all the time. How do I help a friend that I'm concerned about? We have a whole section on this topic in the study guide, and this is just one of 3 exercises. The main message we tell young people is that they should treat a friend who has depression like they would treat any other friend. You want to spend time with them. You want to listen to them. Offer to go out to coffee. Include them in fun activities. But because the illness of depression can be so isolating and that the illness can make someone feel so moody or sensitive sometimes, and the illness is telling you that your friends don't really care about you, it can be difficult sometimes to be a friend to someone who's depressed. So we encourage teens to keep checking in with their friend. We encourage depressed teens to set a goal of going out with their friends at least once a week, even if they don't want to go out, even if they don't stay out too long. Now, another word of caution about trying to help friends. We want to make sure that young people know that they are not their friend's therapist. The job of a teenager is to be a teen, to go to school, to hang out with their friends, to have fun. It is easy to take on too much responsibility for your friend's well-being, and that could become a serious problem for your child. So here are some of the discussion points that we talk about when we talk about how to help a friend. We encourage students to talk to their friends about their concerns by sharing the behaviors that they have observed. Rather than going up to a friend and saying, hey, I think you're depressed, that will not go over very well. They can say things that they've seen, like, I see you stopped coming to practice. I see you aren't returning my text anymore. You don't hang out with us anymore. What's going on with you? We're worried about you. You want to encourage the friend to talk to a trusted adult who can help them get some help. Most teens know that they need to tell an adult if they're concerned about a friend, but that's really a hard thing for a teenager to do. So your child being a friend to someone who's depressed, they can offer to bring their friend to the school nurse. They can offer to take them to the counselor. They can offer to sit with their parents and just to make it more comfortable or easier for that friend to get to some help. Sometimes teens will begin to use alcohol or other drugs to feel better. Your child may observe a dangerous increase in someone's use of drugs. This, of course, can make a depression worse. And this is something important that is worth not only pointing out to the friend, but maybe bringing in a school counselor or bringing in a trusted adult. Lastly, if a friend is talking about self-injury, like cutting or talking about suicide or not being around anymore, you must coach your child that they should tell a trusted adult immediately, a trusted adult who could get help for that child. Even if you're not sure if the friend is serious, even if your child has been sworn to secrecy, you can coach your child to tell that friend that a secret like that is one that they cannot keep. There is a line in our video which really resonates with teens. It says, "It is so much better to lose a friend for a week or a month because you said something than to lose a friend for a lifetime." We also tell teens that by learning the warning signs of depression, it's kind of like learning CPR. One day you may actually be called upon to save a life. The last exercise that we suggest that you might want to do, it highlights coping skills, coping with stress. You can begin by reading the introduction, which is on page 57 of the study guide. And we also suggest you read the section on stress and depression, which is in part 2 of the study guide under the section called The Science of the Brain and Depression. We now know that there is a very strong connection with chronic stress and depression. Chronic stress causes changes in our brain chemistry, and that can increase the likelihood of depression in some individuals. All of us experience stress from time to time. That feeling of frustration, worry, that tension that kind of lives in your stomach or in your shoulders. Our teens have many stressors in their lives. Their friends, grades, the demands of school, the demands of extracurriculars. Each of us handles stress differently. It's because of our innate temperament and because of the skills that we have to cope with stress. All of us also have both positive and negative coping mechanisms, and we want to increase the use of our positive ones by practicing them. Positive coping mechanisms develop resilience, and resilience helps us manage stress and adversity. Negative coping skills, they may provide a temporary fix, but it can also be harder then to deal with whatever it is you've procrastinated over. And sometimes using, for example, drugs and alcohol to provide that temporary feel-good moment, this can lead to additional problems. So, to get into this exercise, I suggest you first make a list of your own positive and negative coping mechanisms. We offer a few suggestions like exercising, taking a nap, being with your friends, watching funny movies, listening to music. Taking a bubble bath is one of my favorite ones. Be creative. The list should also include ways to both release stress physically and emotionally. Listen, balling up paper and tossing it out is much better than screaming at your spouse. Next, you might want to sit down with your child and go over your list of positive and negative ways that you cope with stress. For example, you might say, when I'm under stress, I procrastinate, I put things off. Then you ask your child to create their list. This discussion can become much less emotionally charged when we share our own stressors and the way that we cope with stress. Just having a conversation with our child about their coping skills can lessen stress in our child's life. Once we open up this conversation with our children, they may realize that they can actually talk to us and that we can actually listen to them. Bottom line, we want our kids to be able to anticipate situations ahead of time that may cause increased stress and then begin to take some steps to manage that stress early on. Since we brought up talking and listening to your child, that's what I would like to talk about next. You know, no matter what age your child is, it could be a hard conversation to talk about depression, to talk about treatment, even to talk about the stress in their daily lives. It could be emotional. It could be emotional for us. So maintaining a tone of compassion and hopefulness will help us as parents stay focused and stay grounded. You want to encourage discussion, but it's discussion on their lives. What's going on in all areas of their lives, not just the depression and their mental health. How's school? How are their friends? How are their outside activities coming along? You want to practice active listening. Active listening involves a couple of things. It typically involves finding a protected, quiet space where you can really connect with your child. It usually involves eye-to-eye contact. You know, be prepared when you're having these conversations that you may not hear things that you want to hear. You know, if your child's in pain, it hurts us as well. Now, I've also been told by parents that if you try to sit down and actually look your kid in the eye and have a face-to-face with them, for some kids, often for boys, this may be a little too much for them to handle. So some of you may find it's easier to have discussions when you're taking a walk, when you're in the car, when you're shooting hoops in the driveway, some sort of side-by-side activity that may work better for your child. You want to keep the door open for future conversations. For example, you may see changes in them, or you may have opportunities to have a discussion with them based on something you just heard them say, or maybe something you saw in their daily life. These are called teachable moments. There may be something you saw on television. There may be something you heard on the radio. Maybe something that you read in your local newspaper or something on Facebook. These give you those teachable moments when you can have a conversation with your child without actually sitting down and having a lecture. So look for those opportunities to bring up topics on mental health and stress with your child. The study guide offers a bookmark, which is a wonderful takeaway, and you can download this or print a copy of it off of our website or out of the study guide itself. The bookmark reviews the signs of depression, how to help yourself if you're struggling, how to help yourself if you're concerned about a friend. You may want to make a copy of this and put it up on the fridge, or maybe on the coffee table, or by your bedside. The last bullet point, who do I go to at school and in my community? This is really an important bullet point for parents to talk about with their child. What adults do you have in your life? What adults do your children have in their life that they can talk to if they have a problem? You know, maybe it's an aunt or an uncle or a close friend. Maybe it's a member of the clergy or a coach or a teacher. But it's really important for you guys as parents to have a discussion with your child about who can you go to if I'm not around or you're just not comfortable talking to me. I want to end with a look at happiness. When your child is dealing with a mental illness like depression, we of course want our children to feel better, but we also need them to learn how to manage the illness, how to manage the rough spots that are going to occur, perhaps throughout their lifetime. We want them to be happy and we want them to be healthy, but it's important to kind of understand what that really means. To be happy, kids need strong relationships. We want them to have healthy relationships. We want them to believe that there's other people out there and that they can have a positive future, that they can learn how to set goals for themselves and reach those goals. We can teach our kids how to connect with people. We can teach our kids how to shake someone's hand, how to look them in the eye, how to advocate for themselves to develop those strong, meaningful relationships. We can help our kids be good problem solvers. We can help our kids make good decisions. We also want our children to have a good self-esteem, a good sense of self-worth. And that comes typically from being good at something. You know, everybody's good at something. Maybe your child is really good at art, or they've got great writing skills. Maybe they're just a really, really good friend. We want our kids to be able to be empathetic, to put themselves in someone else's shoes, and we can model that by putting ourselves in our child's shoes. We want our kids to have a sense of humor. We want them to be able to laugh at themselves, to laugh at the silly mistakes we're going to make as parents. We want them not to take everything so seriously. We want to let our kids know that we believe in their future. They're going to get better, and they are going to have a fine life. Now, this study guide is just one tool that you can use to help your child on this journey. Some of you may be thinking that you want your school to know about this video and this study guide. That's terrific. Some school administrators, school social workers, nurses, they're very open to suggestions. Others may have schools that are not so open to suggestions. If you're interested in bringing this study guide to your middle school or your high school, we suggest you start by identifying the people in your building who are going to be most. So gather your allies. Again, maybe it's the school nurse or the social worker. Maybe it's the health teacher. Bring this information to them. Guide them to the Erika's Lighthouse website or to the educational corner of the Balanced Mind Foundation.
Muted.
You can contact us for a copy of the study guide. Good luck, parents, in bringing this to the school. We certainly hope you'll be able to go down that route. But even if you don't, you now hopefully are leaving with some new ideas and some areas. Bullying does tend to take place where teachers can't necessarily see it, sometimes the lunchroom table, but maybe there's somebody else that they can sit with when they get back to school. But role-playing is a great idea. So if somebody does this, maybe your child might be able to brush that off with a sense of humor and go, well, you know, so what? You know, maybe you can teach your kid to walk away from the situation. So in the study guide, we offer a number of different suggestions for kids to embrace, to begin to combat bullying in the school. But mom, and you can do a lot of role-playing with your child. 5 times without their parents having to be notified or involved. And in that session, the counselor may be able to coach the child on how to bring parents on board. Ultimately, depending on the severity of the depression, you're going to possibly need your parents on board. But we just tell kids, just keep trying. Keep talking to people. Keep asking for help until somebody is listening to you, until you find the help that you need. Again, it might be an aunt or an uncle or somebody else that can help guide this child to help.
Can you comment on depression with a seasonal component and how to help our child both at home and at school?
Well, seasonal affect disorders, seasonal depression, real. It's hard for all of us to feel good when we've got consistent days of darkness. Again, that might be something that you want to discuss with the therapist. I know that there's light therapy and there's different techniques. Getting good sleep, making sure you get exercise during the periods when you're not feeling as healthy as you do during other seasons, and involving the support team at the school. So, for example, if winters are particularly hard for your child, make sure the nurse knows about that, because maybe there could be some timeouts that your child could take and just go to the nurse. Maybe there's even a light box in the nurse's office. In the summer months, you just make sure you get the exercise. So I think that might be something that you may need to discuss with your own therapist, and then just try to work out some accommodations within the building. If schools know what your child is going through, I think most schools try to be very accommodating without having to have any special IEPs or 504 accommodations. It's just really common kindness and courtesy to kids who are struggling with emotional issues, just like they would accommodate kids who may have physical problems.
How can parents help when their child is resistant to professional help and responds negatively or with self-deprecating talk?
We covered that in our webinar on our parent handbook. Kids often don't want to go to therapy. They don't necessarily believe that they need help, but you can use their behaviors as something that you can share with them. You could say, well, you've been really moody. You haven't come out of your room. You don't participate in the activities you used to participate in. I'm not sure what's going on, but I know you don't look like my normal, happy, lighthearted child, and so let's go to the pediatrician and find out what's going on. Our handbook offers lots of tools on how to engage kids in therapy when they don't really want to be there. You just keep wanting to come back to the behaviors you observe, and the bottom line is this is a health issue.
Can you comment on the NAMI Basics program or the family-to-family programs that are geared towards parents and caregivers of children with emotional or behavioral issues?
No, I personally don't know about those programs, so I really can't comment on that. people? What are good coping mechanisms for yourself, even at a young age? We also encourage parents to think about doing some of the basics that we're now learning are so helpful for kids to manage their feelings, to teach them breathing techniques, to even do some yoga and meditation with your young children. These are great tools that we can give our kids even at a very young age. So stay tuned to the Erika's Lighthouse website. Maybe someday you may see something for young kids. You know, having said that, I hope you will all be able to check out our website. There's lots of good information on there for parents and teens as well.
Somebody wanted to add a comment that I think you talked about this concept in the previous webinar. This person said,
Situation. Girls want to talk about friendships. Girls want to talk about clothes. Girls want to talk about a lot of different things. You know, and boys, I know, are harder to connect with sometimes. And sometimes girls, we just don't want all the information that they give us. But what I also know is, what I also talked about is sometimes that face-to-face is harder for some kids, and just going for a walk, just being together, doing something sports related, but really saying, I hear you. And active listening also involves kind of nodding and, you know, a lot of encouragement, like, okay, oh, I see, you know, just these kind of things that they train therapists to do. We should do that as parents too, to kind of pull out a conversation.
so maybe if you're a mom and you can't play basketball, you can watch a basketball game on TV
Sure.
with your son and find a way to talk at the same time.
Absolutely.
And another question, thank you for those examples. They're very helpful. Another question is, can you offer any suggestions on how to get support from the school when they don't see the same behaviors that we are seeing at home? It is not uncommon for kids to hold together at school and then completely fall apart when they come home.
Well, yes, I mean, we've already talked a little bit about that, but you know, a conversation with your principal, a conversation if you're lucky enough to have a school that has a social worker or a nurse, just what are, basic things that are done in school to, help kids that may be having a rough patch, a rough moment. Not everybody keeps it together every day at school. So, particularly if you do have a child that's struggling with any kind of emotional difficulties, go in and say, sometimes at home, they have meltdowns when they come home. If you're, do you see this at all? And here's what's helpful when my child is at home. Here's what I would love you to be able to do, classroom teacher or principal, if my child were to start showing some of these symptoms at school. But you're right, most kids, a lot of kids are, school's really important. Your friends are there. You can keep it together. My child was very capable of keeping it together during the day, and then she would come home and just let loose. But that was their release, and then, we talked about pulling yourself back together again and, going on with all the tasks you have to do after school. So come in with specific examples of what you've seen and how you've managed successfully at home, and just offer it up as suggestions when they start to see it, if they start to see some of this behavior in their classroom.
You've talked about bringing Erika's Lighthouse, the video-based study guide into schools, and approaching sympathetic teachers. How do you identify which teachers are sympathetic to the mental health cause and care about erasing stigma?
Well, you might find yourself in the building sometimes and just kind of have a sense. Sometimes health teachers, the people who actually have the responsibility of teaching any kind of mental health unit, again, each school is different. Some of them may have social workers. You may have had teachers call you throughout the year and just say, I'm concerned about your child, this is what I'm seeing, or just teachers that you feel you've got a personal connection with. Those are the people that you want to go to. Nurses, school nurses, if you're lucky enough to have a school nurse, they see kids in their office all the time. We call them the frequent flyers. They're the kids who've got the stomach aches and the headaches, which of course are part of the package of a child who has depression. They may be a good source. Ask your child who they like. Who's their favorite teacher? Who do they think really listens to them, and who do they really connect with? That may be the person to start with.
A favorite teacher is often someone who looks beyond the grades and the classwork and tries to see the whole person.
That's right, Jessica.
And what suggestions do you have? We've talked about how peers can talk to their friends when they notice depressive symptoms or suicidal tendencies and ideations. What suggestions would you have for siblings? Because it's a little bit of a different dynamic.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up too. That was a big piece of what we talked about in our last webinar also. Siblings see so much. They hear so much, and they often don't want to rat out their sibling. They often don't want to cause additional trouble or worry you. In the last webinar we talked about that if your child is dealing with depression, the whole family is going to be affected. The whole family is dealing with depression. So back to that slide that I had on talking to your child who might be struggling. Same thing applies for siblings. You probably will have to initiate that conversation for all the reasons I just mentioned. They may not want to trouble you. They may not want to get their sibling in trouble. But you can say to your sibling, sometimes I'm worrying about, Susie. Sometimes I worry about your brother or sister. How about you?
Mm-hmm.
If you ever hear your sibling talking about hurting themselves or not wanting to be around. If you ever observe that, you need to come to me, and I will not tell them how I learned about this, but that we're all in it together to help your brother or your sister. But again, parents, you probably have to start that conversation.
Another question, you talked about how a sense of purpose, goals, and self-esteem helps a person deal with depression, and you were saying that often a good sense of self-esteem comes from knowing what you're good at. How can you help discover your child's talents or cultivate those gifts?
Well, having good relationships, being good at something, this is for all kids. It's not just for kids who have depression. In my family, we tried out a lot of things. We tried violin, we tried horseback riding, we tried ice skating. We did a lot of things to try to find something that would connect with my child. But you know your kids. You know that they love to go upstairs and draw. You know that they scribble little poems for Mother's Day, or they come home with gold stars for their writing, or they just love it when they're on the soccer field and they're with their friends. So it means, as parents, we have to kind of be observant. And for some kids, you're going to go through a lot of trial and error till you find that something that resonates with your kid. And you know what? It may not be till they're well into high school, maybe even beyond high school, till they find something that really clicks for them. But you keep watching, and you keep looking, and then you point it out to them. Boy, you really came alive when you played that music, or I just love the way you write, or so we're kind of observing and helping them find their islands of competencies.
And if you have different natural gifts or interests than your child, you may need to be a little bit more observant because it's not as obvious.
True. True. I mean, wouldn't it be great if they did? It wouldn't be great if they did exactly what we did. They're all individuals, and one of your children is going to have one set of talents, and another child's going to have a very different set of talents too.
Okay, we're reaching our conclusion. I just want to remind everyone that you can get a complimentary electronic or hard copy version of this wonderful video-based study guide. I found the video very enlightening. I recommend it for everyone. You can write to Erika's Lighthouse at gmail.com, and that's Erika with a K. And you can visit the website, erikaslighthouse.org. We also want to remind people that a recording of the webinar will be available in the chat and webinar section of the Balanced Minds website, www.thebalancedmind.org. And I want to thank you, thank Peggy again for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us and being so generous with your time. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. And thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, Jessica.